Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Genius Project, and this is the second part of our eighth project, Project 8B. And we are here with Dr. Joe Tatta, and the name of the project is How to Empower Effective Health Behavior Change in Physical Therapy Practice. Last time we talked a little bit about Dr. Tatta's discussing his journey to change his practice and to be more inclusive of integrative health. And it's basically rooted in the biopsychosocial approach with acceptance and commitment therapy. So welcome back to the Genius Project, Joe. We're happy to have you here.
It's great to be sharing this Saturday with you guys.
A Saturday afternoon together, nothing better, right?
No, I had a nice little cup of coffee before this. I'm all amped up to chat with you guys.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we started to talk a little bit last time about sort of values-based approaches and really looking at establishing meaningful life activities and maybe moving towards that terminology instead of goal setting, which has sort of been historically where we've come at this from a rehab perspective. And we didn't get a chance to dig into that too much. So I wonder if you want to, first of all, comment for us, Joe, on the sort of difference from maybe an acceptance and commitment therapy perspective, because values-based sort of a goal setting really has stemmed out of that sort of paradigm shift, hasn't it? Can you tell us
it has. Yeah, I mean, values has existed definitely in the work we've all done as physical therapists, and of course, the work mental health providers have done. But ACT really took the body of work of values and started to really put it under the microscope and say, okay, what's the research behind this? What does this look like in real life for people? What does this look like in clinical practice? And it's interesting when you first start to talk about values, all of us as professionals are going to say, well, yeah, I talk to my patient about what's important to them. Yeah, I do. Like they don't want to have pain anymore. That's important to them. They want to be able to walk without pain. So that's meaningful to them. It's like, well, it is meaningful. But when you really look at values, and I think all of us are on the same page here in the sense that we're kind of beyond just looking at helping someone walk again or helping someone have, being intimate, let's say, in a way that's pain-free. Yes, we want to check all those boxes off. But I think we're all starting to move now toward how can we really globally impact someone's entire life? Because when you have pain, it's not just a physical function part, right? So values, I mean, there are hundreds of different types of value domains. ACT breaks it down into about 10 kind of really important ones. But as a practitioner, and I think this is the answer to your question, Carolyn, in a long-winded way, you really have to kind of hit probably at least 4 of those domains, if not 10 of those domains, for someone to really say, yes, this has made a big impact on my life. Because if we're just working on, let's say, for example, I want to be able to walk my dog for 10 minutes in the evening without having pain. Okay, makes sense. I love my dog. I love being a supportive caregiver. And that kind of hits one part of a domain. But where else does that carry over into someone else's life? So starting to look at all these different domains. And as you as a practitioner start to help someone contact or recontact these domains, that's when you really start to see kind of like, the big changes, the light bulbs go off over people's heads. Like I even forgot that I was so involved in these activities. You helped me bring this back into life, so to speak. So that's what I'm interested in. And what's interesting about values with regard to pain specifically, and this is across all chronic pain syndromes. So ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, really is a behavioral therapy.
Right.
So there's cognitive therapies, there are behavioral therapies, and then there are cognitive behavioral therapies. Now, most of the things that we're doing nowadays are cognitive behavioral therapies, but ACT has a very strong lean towards behavior and changing behavior. And there's some good research out there that shows that you may not even have to change the C, meaning the cognitive part, in order to impact the B, the behavior.
Right.
So in essence, you can go right for the B without worrying about the C and have some kind of positive impact. So values, in essence, are that B.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying a strict behavioral approach is not really supported by hardly anyone nowadays. So I always recommend that we keep in mind that all of our patients are thinking and feeling beings, right? That's a part of it, whether you're using ACT or Caroline, I know you use CBT, and all of us
Correct.
use pain education, right? So that's all the C.
Yeah.
But values is that B part that really can have a strong impact on that patient.
Joe, has it been your experience, because you've worked with a lot of clinicians and training them in ACT and working in these domains, is it an easier transition? Because one of our goals in these conversations is to help clinicians make this transition into a more whole person approach. Have you found in your experience that it's easier to move into the behavioral domains than maybe some of the cognitive domains? Are clinicians generally more comfortable in that area?
Yeah, they're more comfortable with the behavioral aspects of care. And, really, in essence, promoting exercise, changing movement is a behavior.
Correct.
Mhm.
So we kind of, we get that.
Yeah.
Even I was having a conversation with a university professor a couple of weeks ago, and cognitive and behavioral interventions are now in the CAPTE, the Commission of Accreditation of Physical Therapist Education, in the requirements. And they're seeded throughout our training in PT school. It's just that we don't necessarily have a class that's called cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Do we need that? Maybe not. It just depends on how a university program decides to roll things out like that. As long as we're introduced to it in some way, which professionals are in PT, then yes, the behavior part is easier for people to start to wrap their brain around. Although, as I mentioned before, we shouldn't throw the C out, the cognitive part out.
Correct. Yeah. So it's really a blend, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. I mean, thoughts affect behavior, and behavior affects thoughts.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And thoughts and behaviors can be attached to negative as well as positive thoughts. And so that's a big piece. I like what you were saying about hitting 4 to 10 of those domains is what really drives the person to really be able to say, I'm me again, or I'm where I want to be, or this is the direction I've been wanting to go and didn't know it. I think a lot of times as PTs, we have these functional movement scales that everybody is, questionnaires and movement scales that we're trying to hit, like, are you able to work without pain? Are you able to do this? The neck disability index and the DASH and those scales. But often paired to those that people don't use in physical therapy practice, or at least I don't see it a lot, is quality of life scales. And to me, oftentimes what we'll see is the change in like you said, the behavior of movement, the behavior of, I can walk my dog. I can go up and down the stairs now, but they will still say that their quality of life isn't any good.
That's right. And I think
and that may be why that scale doesn't change when those simple behavior scales do.
It is. You're right, Susan. As a profession, we've been very focused on movement, and that's good. And we should be focused on movement. But how do we kind of, expand the periscope and take a much broader view and say, okay, how does us promoting movement impact someone's life globally, and how do we measure that?
Joe, can you just run through those 10 domains for us so that our listeners can get a sense of what they are?
I'll give 10's overwhelming, but I'll give therapists the 4 most important ones.
There we go. That's perfect.
Or the 4 important ones that I think are most impactful for PT care, so to speak.
Okay, perfect.
That's 1 is health. Makes perfect sense, right? 2 is love. Now, under love is boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, intimacy. So all that falls under love, right? Because not everyone's married. There's lots of different ways to express love.
Right.
3rd is recreation. So a little bit different than physical activity, so to speak, but just recreation, right? So we have health, love, recreation.
So are we talking play? Is that sort of the idea in recreation, really? Yeah.
That can fit under there.
Yeah.
And then the 4th one are relationships. So notice how the love is different than relationships. because it's kind of love is a very, specific thing for people, but relationships can be family, friends, coworkers, all sorts of relationships. We have relationships with the community and community members. All that can kind of start to fit under there.
Right. And so what you've really summarized from a values perspective is the social part of biopsychosocial, haven't you? Yeah.
It starts to hit on the social part, which I think is so important, because I can tell you, until I trained in ACT, I really probably did not have that as part of my practice. And I think that's important, important for us to, recognize as professionals, like take a moment, like at the end of your day, pour a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, and like look at a biopsychosocial model and really say, how am I objectively measuring and tracking this? And the social was not big on it. Didn't exist. It didn't exist in my practice.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about relationships. I talk about nurturing relationships and toxic relationships with my patients. And certainly we hit on that. We look at some peer support strategies, but I would agree. Even being more CBT trained, I would say I don't hit the social as much as I think I should be. And so that's a really interesting component.
Yeah, it is. And I like the way that works together. And I love the way that the domain of love is different from the domain of relationships, because, love and intimacy are two different things. And relationships is something that is the piece that was like missing with me. Like the love and the recreation was always part, at least in the last few years of what I've done, the last 10 years. But the relationship part and how important that is, and the connection to their tribe. And like you talk about peer support, that's a new tribe, but it's a tribe that understands and, can shared experiences.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes, especially I think with love, and all of us may have been there at some point, like when you're in love and you feel like, you've hit this spot of bliss, like I'm with this person, they're filling me up. And, just like many things in life change, oftentimes like that relationship you're in with someone changes. Sometimes, it ends. Sometimes it doesn't give you the same, meaning it used to, so to speak. And when you really look at all these different value domains, what the research shows is the more people can engage, the more domains they engage in, the richer their life in essence is. So sometimes, especially I think when people are young, they're looking to get married and that love is so important. It's like, okay, it is, but let's not lose friendships and family relationships and work relationships, all those things. So keeping people in contact, that's what really keeps people active, really talking about activity, so to speak, from the social domain.
I always love the study, and I have to go back and figure out who the author was again, but the study that showed that the older women who actually reported to their family docs with knee osteoarthritis with pain were actually, when you look at them globally, were the women who were the loneliest, right? That lack of connection is actually a very sensitizing for our neuroimmune system, right?
And even if you go back and read Man's Search for Meaning, which was written by Viktor Frankl, who was, a Holocaust survivor in a concentration camp. Now, you would think that in a concentration camp where there's quote unquote nothing, it'd be very difficult for people to contact these domains. However, he was, in a beautiful way, able to develop and still nurture these domains in what you think would be a context that's almost very bare.
Right.
But even in a context that's bare, he was able to still cultivate, work was important to him, right? Right. So he was able to help heal people, so to speak. He would create community within that camp. He had love relationships, he had friendships. So even in dire circumstances, which I think when we're talking about people with chronic pain, this kind of, hits a point. Even in dire circumstances, people are still able to contact these domains in some way. It's just up to us to really do the work to help them do that.
Right. Joe, do you think you could give us a little example of how you might take someone through a values-based exercise in your practice?
I can. I have one exercise that is relatively simple. I use it quite often. It's in my book, but I'm going to read it to you today. And it's pretty easy. I definitely recommend you kind of build this out into like the full exercise and make sure you take time. So this kind of exercise maybe would take you, I don't know, probably around 10 or 15 minutes, let's say.
Okay.
You guys want to do it with me? You want to grab a pen and paper?
I'm ready.
Because I can use you almost as, we'll see what comes up for you guys.
Okay. All right. I have a half a sheet of paper in front of me. Do I need more?
Yeah, that's probably okay.
Should be okay. All right. Perfect.
Write
small. Okay.
It depends on how full your life is, Karen.
Well, okay. I need a full page then. Hold on. 1 sec. Let me grab a full page. I've got it. Good. I just became a grandma this week, so my life is very full.
Oh, congratulations!
She's got that love domain really kicked up right now.
I do.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
This might be good. This is going to be fun then.
Okay.
So it can be difficult for people to contact their values when they've had pain, because the only thing they see is pain. And they've lost a lot of the things that were important to them because they focused so much on pain. An act that's called experiential avoidance. So this exercise is called the 80th birthday celebration. And it's basically a values clarification exercise. So I'm going to read this to you kind of directly from the book here. So imagine you're attending your 80th birthday party. On this important day, all of your closest friends, family, and colleagues are at your party, ready to celebrate you and ready to celebrate your full life. Take a moment to think about who you really hope would be there. So think about friends that could be there. Think about family members that might be there. Think about coworkers. Think about members of the community, maybe members of a church or a synagogue or a mosque that you go to. Now it's your birthday, of course, so there's a birthday cake there. And we have all the candles on the birthday cake, and we have a little match, and we're about to light the candles so you can blow that cake out. But before that happens, a good friend of yours stands up. And they say, before you blow out this cake, we want to take a moment, and we want to honor you, and we want to honor your life. So one by one, your friends come up to the microphone, one at a time, and they say something that's nice and special and meaningful about you and the life that you've lived. So now I want you to imagine what those friends would say about you as a person. And you might want to write a couple of these down. So what would your friends say about you as a person? What would you want them to say about you in your role as a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a partner? What would you want them to say about you as a parent, if you have children? And if you don't have children, maybe you have acted in a way that is like a parent to maybe someone else. What would you want them to say about you in your role as a sibling? What would you want them to say about you in your role as in your work? So for you, both of you, as a healthcare provider or a physical therapist. Imagine what you want them to say about the impact you've made and how you've cared or nurtured for others, or maybe even yourself. And maybe how you've made a contribution to your community. They might share memories of times when you worked towards something that was important to you. That comes up, just write that down. You may have had courageous moments in your life where you took bold action. Something comes up, you can write that down. And there may be a way in life in which you lived very deliberately or purposefully towards something that was important to you. You may want to write that down. So we can just pause that there. And then, so we're not going to do this here, but I'm just going to continue this. So it's nice to let that scene dissolve for someone, right? Because they've made contact with all these rich, meaningful things. It's a little prompting that has to be done. You guys are kind of experts in this, so I'm not prompting too much. Now what I usually do with the patient is have them try to imagine a different scenario at the birthday where they stood up and they didn't lead a life that they valued, and what that looks like. And instead you were guided by pain or stress or unwanted thoughts or emotions or bodily sensations. So we're kind of giving them a sense of, if I lead life by my values, what does that look like on paper? If I lead life by stress, or I let pain lead me, or uncomfortable thoughts or images about, what does that look like? So they're two very different things. And then really at the end, it's really just to help people notice that with regard to behavior, because we're talking about behavior, right? Is that they have the ability to choose how they want to act and behave, even if pain is present, so to speak. So do you want to, do you guys want to share some of the things you mentioned there?
Sure.
Go ahead, Susan, you can start.
Okay, so I had to just start grouping friends to be at my party because I couldn't write all the names down, which made me feel really good. I think that's been one of the things for me during COVID is, like CSM is going on now, and how I really miss just the contact of my colleagues. That was the one time we would all kind of get to see each other in person and really have that FaceTime together. But just, my family, my daughter, my PT friends and colleagues, my good close friends that I've had through my life, and the group of people I call my PT children that I've come to know them in such a different way from my PT colleagues that I do call them my PT kids. And that was just really nice to just have that feeling of all of those people together in one place. It felt a little overwhelming at first, but then it kind of like sunk in as like, oh, this is really, really nice to just think of all of those people in one spot, which was really, really very interesting to do.
What I love about that, Susan, is especially for people who live with pain, they can oftentimes feel very lonely.
Yeah.
And just reconnecting them with a little bit of this makes them realize, okay, my life has not been lonely. And even though I may be alone right now, there are ways I can cultivate feelings of not being alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. It really is. You want me to keep going?
Well, let's go to Carolyn and come back
Okay.
to
Sure.
you.
Yeah.
So it's interesting as you really sort of look at friends. I've been blessed with a very rich and large family, and so what I go to first is certainly my kids, my spouse, my husband, my my siblings, all my nephews and nieces, and just sort of having the love of people who've known me very intimately through my life kind of there. And I definitely have friends and colleagues that I would want to include in that. But for me, that sort of loyalty and consistency around kind of family is what really brought sort of a smile to my face, or that thought about that would be amazing, right?
And that's great, because what I like about that, and I didn't mention this, is that even though if you're going to work on 4 or 10 domains, they're not equal. It's not like they're equal percentage in each domain. Sometimes, for example, if you have your first grandchild born, that's just
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
come into life,
Yeah.
that one domain of, let's say, being a nurturing spirit in your, that's more full at that moment in your life, and that's okay.
Right.
So the other domains might shrink just a little bit. That's okay, but there's still usually contact in some way with all the others.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Good, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
So so those are the people who kind of showed up.
Yep.
And I'm curious what the people said about you.
So my family, my husband and my daughter would talk about the loving kindness, generousness of me, that compassion that I have and that I share, and my loyalty that I'm very steadfast in, my love is unconditional, and that I learned through my life to give others space to be able to grow and shine in their own light. And by doing that, I've allowed myself to really grow and change myself. From my friends, more about my generosity and expansiveness in my thoughts, and creating and sharing all the ways that I work with others, whether it be as an educator or as a mentor or just as a colleague together, that the bravery of standing up and talking about things when the rest of the group would be like heresy. So I think, I like that they would be honoring that with me, because that's been very important to me. And then my gift to the world, and my gift to the community that they would talk about would be that I took the time to break out of just a practice to be sure that I was putting things out there that were accessible to others to read, to hear, to talk, to do, and my global impact with my foundation on women's health as part of that.
Good. So in ACT, we talk about listening with ACT ears. So when you listen with ACT ears, in this sense of values, is just kind of picking out values-based words. So there's a whole bunch in there, Susan. I mean, the whole thing is so values-packed. I love it. But the things I picked out were qualities of compassion, generosity, caring, mentoring, bravery, accessibility to others in the community, things like that. So so obviously we're ideally helping a patient with this, right? So once you hear those words, right, you can write them down, or they're actually on the paper there in front of you, the person's writing it down. Then it's your job to obviously help them reconnect with, how can you act in a compassionate way today? So if compassion is one of your values, how can you act in a compassionate way today, Susan?
I can act in a very compassionate way today. I work where my family, my siblings are connecting, and my sister's been going through a hard time. And I want to keep honoring the compassion that I've been able to show her. It's hard to treat a family member. It's hard to help a family member in a way that we would a client. And I've been grateful for my compassion and my patience to work with her, and I want to keep nurturing that today, into the family call, and share how much she's really come through and has really worked well on really learning how to make some changes.
Beautiful. So as a therapist, so as a PT now, working like with a patient, so to make this like objective for them, so you're going to take time today where you're going to go visit your sister and have a 2-hour lunch with her and talk to her about the challenging time that she's having. And as you do that, that's going to help you to connect to being a compassionate, loving, generous, and caring sibling. Right.
Yep.
So there's the part of there's part of that in there that we can't really measure so much, because they're values. We can't measure compassion necessarily. But then there's the objective part that we work on as clinicians. Like today, you're going to get in the car, walk down the street, spend 2 hours with your sister, and then come back home. So, again, a lot of people spend time in their home if they have chronic pain. They don't get out and see other people. So it's a nice way to help people support others. Excellent. Carolyn, you want to?
Sure. So it's interesting as I'm listening to Susan's sort of values or things that people will say about her, and I'm thinking, oh, my list looks pretty similar, and maybe that's why we also are great friends and sort of great colleagues that way. I would definitely say globally, as I went through the different sort of components, just me as a person or a friend, that I'm very generous, I'm very loving, I'm very loyal, I think is something that certainly would also apply to my spouse and my children. That idea of unconditional love, that idea of sort of digging down when things are difficult. I don't mind uncomfortable conversations. I'm quite happy to challenge the status quo in order to, in a way, not to make anybody's life more difficult or challenging, or to say, listen to my voice, I'm right, but around having just meaningful conversations to see change happen. And I do that in my family, but I also think I do that in my professional life. I would say from my kids, and I hope my grandkids as they grow up, but that I'm a very loving, fun provider, and that, again, that loyalty around family is very important to me. And from a community perspective, just that I would always go the extra mile, maybe to the detriment sometimes of myself, right? So again, I've really striven, that's not a word, but strove, is that a word? I'm not sure. Anyway, I have strived, maybe is the word, to be conscious of balance, but also know, as I'm approaching 60, that I haven't always achieved that, but that is a continual goal that I need to make sure that I give, but that I also give to myself and to my family and relationships, that I stay kind of balanced in that piece.
Great, excellent. So we can work with let's just work with one of those, because
Yeah.
some of those were similar. One thing that I noticed that both you and Susan have in common was that bravery to challenge the status quo. So putting values-based living into action, so to speak, right?
Right.
What could you do today to challenge the status quo?
So actually I've already done it, in that we are currently staying with my son and daughter-in-law for a couple of days and having a little snuggle time with our brand new grandson. And my daughter-in-law made a comment around, is it okay if her parents live in town? Is it okay if my parents stop by today? And I'm like, is it okay? Of course, let's have them in for dinner. Let's meld these two families. Let's really make this, a celebration of love, including everyone and being very inclusive. So I will cook dinner tonight for her family and us, and her parents and us, and it will be lovely to kind of really connect over this new baby.
Yeah, great. And what's interesting to me as you're talking, Carolyn, over your right shoulder there is that reframe rehab sign. So I think that whole reframe rehab approach really fits well into challenging the status quo, right? Everything we're talking about today almost is challenging the status quo of what we do as professionals, so to speak.
Right.
Now, earlier on, so you guys did a great job. Early on, Carolyn, you asked me the 10 domains. I didn't want to give those away because it would have kind of ruined this exercise.
Sure, fair.
But I'll read those off to you now.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Those 10 domains. And now everyone can listen and you'll hear those domains come up in the things that both of you said. So those domains are health, family, romance, work, spirituality, education, training, or personal development. That kind of falls in the same category depending on where you are in life. Parenting, leisure, friendships, and community. So all those in one way or another probably was in there. So like the spirituality one, I just posted something online the other day about, because I'm very curious about spirituality, because when you look at some of the research, it's very impactful for certain people. I think some of what Susan was saying about that helping women and that aspect of it, I think there's some kind of spiritual connection there on some level. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, Susan. But
no, I would absolutely 100% agree that it's been a journey of mine to understand my spiritual growth and where it goes from the foundation that I had, and what that means and how that looks. And so that's definitely a big part of that work.
And I love what you said. So it's been a journey. So the
Still
difference,
is.
the difference
Absolutely.
between values and goals is a goal is something you can check off. I want to become president, check that off. I want to lose 10 pounds, check that off. I want to exercise 20 minutes today, check that off. But the value of nurturing your spirit, the value of nurturing community relationships, the value of being a loving grandmother, those values continue. You never reach the end of any of those.
Right.
So that's why values-based living is so important, because it keeps people in motion, so to speak.
I love the idea of spirituality being sort of encompassing this idea of purpose-driven life, right? Like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And then values kind of feeds into that. Yeah. Are you familiar with some of Marlissa Sullivan's work on on spirituality? Yeah. So she's actually going to host a course for us in the spring, and so again, I'm curious to see how well that's received in the PT community, if we're going to be able to run it, because that's always the challenge, right? It's like, what do we have to do as physios around spirituality and sort of a purpose-driven life? But I think it's, as you said, a very important component. For many people, not necessarily everyone, but many of us are asking the questions, why am I here? What is my purpose? Why, why me? Why this life? I ask that question of myself all the time, right? Why have I chosen to take this path? And why am I not okay with the status quo? And what is it about that piece that keeps driving me forward, right?
Why did pain show up in my life? And how has that pain changed things or guided what I'm doing differently?
Right. Excellent. Well, Joe, that was the intention of today was to actually have a number of guests come in. This is the first time we've run this on a Saturday, and maybe our guests just had other things to do on a Saturday, but I can't thank you enough for this very interesting sort of discussion that we've had and observation of one of these sort of key tenets of ACT, and really just introducing it to the PT community. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for all that you do in this space, and for doing your own challenging of the status quo, and just kind of making us a little bit uncomfortable in a space where we then can grow.
Yep. I appreciate you guys, and your bravery gives me some fuel to do this. Thank you.
Amazing.
Yes, and thank you for allowing us to participate with you today, because anytime, I think Carolyn and I know you agree as well, that we have the time to do our own work is also very empowering and helpful. And it was just such a gift on this beautiful Saturday to have that time with you. Thank you. Joe, I have in the show notes, everybody, I have all of the ways you can get in touch with Dr. Joe Tatta, who's with us today. Can you please just give us the name of your book and how they can find your book?
Sure. The book is called Radical Relief, A Guide to Overcome Chronic Pain. You can find it on Amazon, and you can order it on Amazon. If you live outside of the US, the best place to order it is on optp.com.
Okay, so it's now in the OPTP community. Perfect.
Yeah, as well as Amazon. Yeah. And of course, everyone can find information about me by going to the website at the integrativepainscienceinstitute.com.
And that all of that information is in the show notes with this video. Thank you so much for your time, and we will see everybody for Project 9. Stay tuned.
Thanks.